In episode 3, we saw a great shot of Mabel beginning her portrait on the wall. She's wearing this big ring. We can see she's charcoaling the artwork that would have become Bunny. We also see, just to the right of that, the beginning of artwork that'll be Miss Indoko. In episode 9, we see that she has gone farther. She's got Bunny, Miss Indoko, Oliver, Winnie the dog, Charles, Jan, Ursula, Dr. Grover Stanley, Teddy and Theo Demas, Uma, and Amy up on the wall. By the end of the episode, she's colored most of them in. This artwork is what we've been seeing in the end credits, but not always. In the end of episode 1, we saw this Charles artwork, but we also had a character who I can't recognize from the show. She's in the opening credits, but she is in the artwork. In episode 2, we had Mabel herself and one of the cats. In episode 3, we have Oliver. Note that Oliver is in a different pose. Here he's looking out the window while on his cell phone and drinking a glass of wine, while in the finished product, he's sitting on his couch drinking wine. At least I think it's wine. I don't believe it is bourbon. In episode 4, we saw Howard the cat guy, as well as Detective Williams. In episode 5, we got Uma and Amy. Uma appears to be drinking out of wine glass, but there are liquor bottles behind her. Is one of those bourbon? Episode 6, we had Grover Stanley and Ursula. Ursula leaning against her delicious gut milk. Episode 7, we had tie-dye guy Oscar, we assume, and Tim Kono got his own artwork. Episode 8, we saw the colored-in Jan and Winnie the dog. Episode 9, the Demases and Miss Indoko. We're trying to solve many mysteries, and I mean many mysteries. I'll list them in a second. But what is going on with Mabel's aunt? Is this woman alive or dead? This is supposed to be an apartment remodel. Is Mabel just doing this for fun, or when the remodel happens, it'll cover it up? Is Mabel doing this as her farewell to the Arconia? Was Mabel supposed to be doing a remodel based on a lot of money that Tim Kono lost? Let's solve Only Murders in the Building. Episode 9, Double Time. Spoilers for the first 9 episodes. If you haven't seen episode 9 of Only Murders in the Building season 1, then you're going to get subbed out with a stand-in for your sex scene. We'll be breaking down each episode for clues, suspects, and red herrings on the hunt to learn who killed Tim Kono, as well as who killed Evelyn the cat, and who poisoned Winnie the dog, who stabbed Jan, who took the green ring, what is that smell coming from Howard's apartment, what made that noise that bothered Dr. Grover Stanley? How does Cookie fit into the Emma and Lucy love life of Charles? Who is the bloody, possibly dead body in front of Mabel in the flash forward? Why did the police scuttle the toxology report on Tim Kono? Who was the late night visitor to Tim's apartment who screamed so much? Guys, we have 1 episode left after this. We are desperate to solve Only Murders in the Building. This podcast is titled Let's Solve Only Murders in the Building. And even though we have theories, we have ideas, who cares what we think? We want to hear everybody's ideas and theories. Please subscribe to the podcast, follow the podcast on the YouTube, subscribe, follow, tickle that like button. As this show is wrapping up, we want to remind you that currently we're doing an after-show podcast on the Disney Plus, FX on Hulu drama, Star Plus, Hot Star drama, Why the Last Man. Coming up on December 29th of this year, 2021, we're going to begin our after-show coverage of The Book of Boba Fett. Coming up in 2022, we're going to be doing a Let's Solve Magpie Murder Season 1. We'll be covering The Last Kingdom Season 5, Star Wars ANDOR Season 1, 1899 on Netflix Season 1, the limited series Star Wars Obi-Wan Kenobi, Game of Thrones House of the Dragon Season 1, Babylon Berlin Season 4, The Crown Season 5, The Mandalorian Season 3, and His Dark Materials Season 3. Before we dive into the clues and suspects, every week we award our last laugh of the week, the most hilarious moment in the episode. And once again, episode 9 had some good chuckles. We're going to give it up to... I'd like to point out that when I offered help, everyone sent me home to get stabbed. Youch. Oh, that Jan. No wonder she has so many positive reactions in the comments. In this week's Double C credit clues, you're going to notice 2 hats in Charles's apartment. One for Charles and one for his stand-in Zaz. If you haven't already, I encourage everyone to check out all previous 8 podcasts we have done here on Only Murders in the Building. I believe, and I do want to add that qualifier, but I do believe we have covered every single clue, hint, and fact that you need to know about the case. And Arconiacs, I thought I'd share this. Are you like me? Do you go through the 4 stages of Arconiac grief? Stage 1. Hey, I wonder if this person could be the killer. Stage 2. Yeah, that ties into that obscure clue. Stage 3. Dang it! No, it doesn't make sense. This person wouldn't have done it. Stage 4. I give up. Arconiacs, solve this for me. YouTube Arconiacs, I've got a challenge for you. The last podcast we did on episode 8 received 170 comments. That's a record for us, but we want to top it. This week on episode 9, we want more comments on this video than any video we've ever done on YouTube. Also for the YouTube Arconiacs, we haven't come close to breaking our record of likes. We've had a video with 267 likes. I know you guys can break it. Tickle that like button, click the like button, give us a thumbs up. We're going to beat our record. Our challenge to podcast listeners. We need new Apple Podcast reviews. We haven't received a new review since last October 2020. If you're on Audible or Amazon listening to this podcast, if you're on Stitcher, please leave us a review, subscribe. It helps other Arconiacs join the cause to solving this crime. Before we run down the suspects, let's see what episode 9 taught us about our victim, Tim Kono. Tim Kono drank bourbon with the killer who poisoned him. Have we seen anyone drink bourbon before? We've been in a lot of situations where these characters drink. Charles and Jan went out to dinner. The 3 heroes, Charles, Mabel, and Oliver, all had drinks in episode 1. Who is the bourbon drinker? Zaz offers up the suicide note of, "I'm so tired of being lonely," is not a suicide note, but a confession from the killer. Which characters do we know that are extremely lonely? Well, admittedly, once again, our major 3. Mabel has been lonely because she lost the Hardy Boys. Charles has been lonely because he hasn't had a relationship in a while. Oliver's lonely because his son left him and we haven't seen his wife outside of a flashback. Who else is lonely? Is Howard Morris lonely because he lives only with cats? Is Uma lonely because she flips everybody off with the bird? Is Jan lonely because she plays her bassoon out into the courtyard? Who is tired of being lonely? Looking at the garbage bag string, Tim was taking out somebody else's trash. Have we seen anybody else's trash with a blue ribbon? Miss Ndoko heard a late-night visitor, a loud one who sounded like a woman, screaming and having fun in Tim's apartment. Once again, Zaz says this was a crime of passion. Earlier in episode 9, Charles assumes Jan was cheating on him and he gets angry. Was that what happened with Tim Kono? Does his significant other get jealous of somebody, maybe Mabel, maybe somebody else, and then take him out? And let's not forget, there appears to be a bassoon cleaner in Tim's box of sex toys. How did it get there? Was Tim Kono really in a relationship with a much older Jan? One final thing we learned about Tim, or at least it was confirmed in episode 9. What Howard wrote in his complaint is that Tim threatened Howard Morris, the cat guy, with a gun because his cat Evelyn kept going into Tim's apartment. This raises a lot of questions. Threatening somebody with a gun because a cat came into your apartment? What did Tim have in his apartment that he was trying to protect? Also, a question you might ask is, why does Evelyn keep trying to go in there? We'll consider all these things as we go forward in the episode. We're going to do a bit like we did last week, where we're going to look at the who, the how, the why, and the why now with all of our suspects. Let's add a couple more questions. Would they have been drinking bourbon with Tim Kono? And why would they take the green ring? The green ring, if we trust Mabel, is still missing. Who would have taken it? There's some characters, like Mabel herself or Oscar, who we understand their connection to the green ring, and we understand why they could have taken it. But other characters, like Jan, we'd have to provide our own reasons. What would Jan's connection be to Zoe and or the Demuses that could have her want a green ring? And we'll try to do that with all the suspects. Oliver's son Will has not appeared much in the series, and he didn't appear in this episode. But V. Carter wrote, Will knew of the friendship connection of Mabel to Tim Kono and Zoe. He even questioned his dad and Charles why they were having Mabel be a part of the investigative podcast. V wonders if maybe Will was familiar with that group of friends and he was rejected from their friendship circle. Would Will have a connection to Zoe that we haven't heard about or learned about through 9 episodes? Not impossible, but I question it. Could Will have been the romantic relationship with Tim? We've heard the show tell us twice we can't assume that Tim's romantic partner was a female. The show stressed it twice, so we do have to consider characters like Will being that romantic relationship. It's tough to make that assumption because we know Will lives in New Jersey with kids. Would he be carrying on an affair with a much younger adult in Manhattan? We would need some clues to follow that path that way, in our opinion. Once again, listeners, just because I question it, that doesn't mean it's right or wrong. We love you questioning it too. Heck, we even had somebody questioning another suspect that we never talk about. Lebowski Gaming questioned Lester the doorman. Is no one else suspicious of the doorman? He can walk around slipping notes on doors without any of it seeming out of place. He listens to the podcast, so therefore he knows about it, and he even knows where Charles's hat disappears to. Lester the doorman would not be the person going into Tim Kono's at night screaming like a woman. Lester the doorman also, as far as we know, didn't really have a connection to Zoe. Zoe's family owned the entire 11th floor. She could have built a bond with Lester. Thin ice is what that theory is on. Lester the doorman. Again, I don't see it, but that doesn't mean I'm right. That's just another one to question. This episode turned around and really put a focus on Jan Bellows. Let's look about what we learned from Jan in this episode and across all 9 episodes. Jan claims that growing up she had 2 childhoods, one before her parents divorced and then one after her parents divorced, where she got a half-sister who played the flute. The last guy she dated wouldn't let her go first. So let's look at those 2 things. Her parents divorced, she had a half-sister. Zoe is way too young, you would assume, to be her half-sister. Zoe would have been born when Jan was in her late 20s, at least. The last guy she dated wouldn't let her go first. Who was that guy? We also learned that she took a class in nonverbal communication. Would you need that if you were dealing with Theodemus, either as a son or a nephew to the half-sister who she got when her parents remarried? Jan is the voiceover character for episode 9, yet being the voiceover character, unlike most other characters, even Theo, she really doesn't get to talk, not even to the camera. Theo himself even got a couple of stare into the cameras and do some sign language. Jan doesn't tell us anything about how she was attacked. Now, the one point a lot of people are pointing at is Jan being a liar. She asked Charles not to come see her in the symphony. That could be simple pride. To me, there's nothing inherently in that says, okay, she told this one lie to Charles, therefore she's lying about everything, she's a stone cold killer. Could Jan have been drinking bourbon with Tim and poisoned him that way? Well, certainly. He was on the 6th floor, the floor she lived on, before he got on the elevator on the day he died. He could have been there drinking bourbon with her and then throwing out her trash. That's 100% true. Why would Jan take the green ring? Again, we don't have any real connection of why Jan would have taken that green ring. Unless, because she took a nonverbal communication class, she has some connection to Theo and therefore wanted to grab the ring so Theo wouldn't be implicated in Zoe's death. Having said that, in this episode, she proudly throws the newspaper in front of Charles, proclaiming how he caught Teddy Demas, and you would assume Theo Demas, in Zoe's death. So if Jan does have a familiar relationship with Theo Demas, she's very cold about him going to jail for Zoe's death. How could her bassoon cleaning tool end up in Tim Kono's apartment if they don't have any relation? Well, it could have been planted there. But our heroes went through Tim Kono's apartment in the 2nd episode of the show. It's hard to imagine somebody else thinking, oh, we should frame her with this bassoon cleaning tool in that 2nd episode where it was found. While we hear Jan's bassoon in the 1st episode, we don't even see Jan until the 3rd episode. It's also important to note that Jan doesn't know about the podcast until the 4th episode, and by that point, Winnie the dog has been poisoned about, hey, stop doing the podcast. Is there any reason why Tim Kono would have grabbed it without Jan knowing? Let's enter crackpot corner. Why didn't the police want Tim's phone investigated or the toxology report followed up on? Could Tim Kono have been assisting the police? I always call him an informant. Could he have been going through people's garbage, like Jan's garbage, to find clues for the crimes happening in the Arconia? Possibly. Let's look at some listener comments that were trying to make sense of Jan being the actual killer. Finn wrote, Theo's mother could be Jan. She was trying to get them to look at other suspects so her son wouldn't get into trouble. Now, as I pointed out, in this episode, she doesn't have any trouble showing Teddy and Theo in trouble on a front page to Charles. Plus, there's the question of wouldn't Oliver, who's had a relationship with Teddy for a long time, know that Jan was his ex-wife, was Theo's mother? Let's ignore all that, Finn writes. But what if she left them and didn't have a reason to care about him anymore? Okay, fine. Then we have Digital Work Studio, who left the comment, what if Jan is not Theo's mother, but his aunt? Her sister, the flute player, was frustrated because she couldn't share her love of music with her deaf son and left. Jan was only trying to dismiss the Demases as suspects to save her nephew. She lived on the same floor as them. Digital Work Studio also points out, Tim was complaining about missing mail. he lived in apartment 9A, Jan in 6A. It seems much more likely that Mail would go to 6A, Jan's apartment, than Bunny's apartment, 12A, that Tim was looking for. If Jan is Theo's aunt, she opens up one of these packages for Tim, sees the green ring, realizes, ooh, that's another connection to Theo. She takes an engagement ring, sticks it in the package, sends it up to Bunny's apartment. Then Jan keeps the ring, realizes Theo's in trouble, gets Tim to drink some poison. Later during the fire alarm, she sneaks up and shoots him to make it look like suicide. Digital Work Studio goes on that Jan writes some notes to make it look like suicide, but then realizes better of it and types them on the computer. The notes in the trash, according to Digital Work Studio, is closer to her handwriting than the notes on people's doors. Well, okay, that does work, Digital Work Studio, and people who have these thoughts about Jan. I do wonder, though, Jan stabbed herself and then just laid on the floor, waiting for Charles to find her? I'm not saying it's not possible, but boy, that is a long play. You have no idea that he's coming down. How long are you going to wait around? But the theory, if you have some forgiveness, it does work. What do you guys think about this Jan is the killer theory? Comment down below. Hit us on Twitter at DoublePHQ. That's the word double, the single letter P, the letter HQ for headquarters. Instagram at DoublePHQ. Facebook.com/DoublePHQ. Go to our website. Shoot us an email, doublepmedia.com. Let's look at some other suspects. Ursula showed back up in this episode, and Christina wrote, I think it's Ursula, the sea witch. She has access to everything since she takes care of the mail. Well, we really didn't learn anything new about Ursula or even her side hustle Gut Milk. But I do love this one theory that's floating around. The note that Mabel found that had the initials GM were not Gustavo Mora, but in fact, gut milk. I would love to assume that Tim was poisoned with gut milk, but it does appear to be bourbon. But look at Ursula. I bet she drinks bourbon. Uma Heller keeps appearing, but I gotta be honest, they haven't even mentioned Uma Heller's name on the show. We only know it's her name because we saw it on one of the post-it notes on Charles's suspect board. So, love you, Uma, but I don't think you did it. Bunny. Now, Amber Lively wrote, I love the idea of Bunny as a killer, cleaning up the Arconia of pesky cats that don't stay in their own apartments, killing people who don't pay their bills like Tim Kono, and maybe even people who play their instruments too loud. Jan. Amber, this is so fun. And as a character, I love Bunny. She's great. Now, what did we learn new about Bunny in this episode? Well, she wants the podcast people out, but also Bunny makes a point of saying 8 complaints and you can be evicted. But Tim had more than 8 complaints. He had a folder of complaints that Ursula gave to Oliver. We saw him. Why wasn't Tim Kono evicted? Did he have something on Bunny? We know Bunny knows sign language. Is it a chance that she's Theo's grandmother? Reaching at straws here. Staying focused on Bunny, why would she have taken the green ring? I can't think of a reason. Bunny, we assume, age is just a number, was not the person sneaking off to late night rendezvous and screaming in Tim Kono's apartment. I think Bunny is off the list. What do you guys think? A suspect we've been looking a long time at is Howard Morris. Now, his cat, Evelyn, died on the same night as Tim Kono. We had heard that Evelyn visited apartments through window boxes. Did Tim Kono have a window box? Doesn't it seem likely that Evelyn was sneaking in via the air vents, the scratching that we heard Dr. Grover Stanley talking about? Howard Morris lives on the 3rd floor, so if he got poison into Tim Kono, it was not when Tim Kono was coming off the 6th floor. In this episode, Howard claims that Evelyn was poisoned with the same poison that killed Tim Kono. He didn't present any evidence, he just said it. What do you guys think? Should we just accept that? There's also the point we brought up earlier. Howard claims Tim threatened him with a gun because Evelyn kept going into his apartment. Why would Howard have grabbed the green ring? Tricky, tricky, tricky. Doesn't exactly come to mind. Maybe look at that picture of the cat on Howard's apartment. Let's see if it was. The one thing I would wonder is, could Howard have been the late night visitor to Tim Kono's apartment? You might think that as a cat person, Howard would be the one to poison Winnie the dog. But in this episode, episode 9, he claimed to support the podcast. I feel like we're missing something with Howard, but do we have a theory that could work as him the killer? Give us your feedback and let us know. We get feedback about Jose, Oscar's dad, as well as Oscar. There isn't too much about Jose, but Just Me, who's at Seacrest Groove, wrote, "At this point, I think it may actually be Oscar's dad, since he would have access to everyone's apartment as a super, so he could be listening to the investigation of the podcast the whole time." Now, Jose would have a reason to grab that ring, the green ring Zoe wore. Jose also would have a perfectly good reason to kill Tim Kono. Would he be drinking with him? Would he be the person who showed up at night and screaming? Okay, Jose's not that. Now, Oscar, I have always discounted as a suspect, but some recent feedback has had me turn my head. LB wrote about Oscar, "I think Oscar's behavior is very off. He's pretty chill for someone wrongly convicted 10 years ago. He should have been going crazy when the Demas story came to light. How is he not cursing out Tim Kono and the Demases? Oscar has secrets that have yet to come out, or this is poor writing of his character." JT wrote, "I think Tim may have contacted Oscar to apologize and discuss how they could take down Teddy. Oscar's reluctance to talk about the past is very reminiscent of Tim's reaction to Mabel. They both wanted to protect her from Teddy." Then Noor, who on Instagram and YouTube has been leaving great comments that really make me think. Why was Oscar going up to meet Tim Kono on the day he died when the fire alarm's going off? Why did Oscar think Tim would still be in his apartment? Unless he knew that Tim had been poisoned and would still be there. Nor, you're exactly right. Nor continues, "The only way we know or believe that Tim has the green ring on the day he died is because Oscar told us he heard that from Tavo." Think about it. Why would Tim have a meeting with Tavo and the Cutter on January 31st? 15 days after his death, Oscar would have killed Tim Kono for letting him rot in jail for 10 years. And Zoe didn't get the justice she deserved. This is great feedback, and I love it because it makes me think of various things. Oscar could have a reason to put that note on Jan's door. Jan kept trying to turn the focus away from the Demases being guilty. In this scenario, Oscar knows the Demases are guilty and wants them held accountable. And I suppose you could take this clue from this episode. Oscar says that innocent people tuck in their shirt. I'm not sure until this episode Oscar has ever worn his shirt tucked in. Oh, well, he did on New Year's Eve. Let's turn to the big three, and people dislike the idea that any of the big three could do it. But we just know so much more about them that it's easier to come up with theories of them being the killers. Let's look at Oliver. Gavin wrote in and said, "I still think Oliver is our best suspect. He definitely had time to leave the note on Jan's door and could have done that to his own door and, lightly poisoned his dog Winnie. He really wanted Jan to stop pointing the finger elsewhere, and he's done that all along." Gavin continues and says, "I think we will get an Oliver twist ending." Fun. So what do we know about Oliver? He is broke, yet he gets packages on the first episode. So he knows how packages work. He knows they go through Ursula. In episode 1, Evelyn the cat was on his floor. Oliver's lived in the Arconia for a real long time. He would have a connection to many people. His son knew Zoe, Tim Kono, and all those people. His son is a veterinarian who might have access to that drug that Tim Kono was poisoned with. Oliver was constantly annoyed with Jan and would have easily put a note on her door. He had the ability to put a note on her door, but he probably didn't hate her that much. Would Oliver have been drinking bourbon with Tim Kono? Well, all the times we see Oliver, he's drinking wine. But one thing he does do is when he goes to Teddy to get him to finance the podcast, he brings 2 glasses and a bottle of wine. For Tim Kono, could he have brought 2 glasses and a bottle of bourbon? Oliver fits into the father-son theme that the show keeps going on. Now, you may be wondering, well, why would somebody involved with the podcast be the killer? But the show has said twice, including in episode 9, that, hey, it would be real smart for a killer to be part of a podcast revealing everything. Oliver was the one who found the sex toys, who thought to go back to them, and that bassoon cleaner, which points towards Jan. The one question I would have is, why would Oliver keep Zoe's green ring? Unless he's so broke and he saw a piece of jewelry and thought, I could pawn that as well. Charles. Charles is a mess. His personal life, I don't know if we can trust anything he said about it. It might all be Brazos BS. Charles still has that leg of Evelyn the cat, and I still think that's got to pay off one way or another. Is it possible Evelyn wasn't poisoned? Or will the leg be used to show that, yes, Evelyn did have the same poison as Tim Kono? One thing about the drug that poisoned Tim Kono, one of the side effects is memory loss. Some people have trouble remembering things. Charles loses his hat. When Winnie the dog is mentioned, he doesn't remember who Winnie is. He keeps telling stories about a possible relationship with Emma and Lucy. Now we've got this Cookie who left Charles for Saz. He's seeing Bugs Bunny and Porky Pig. Is he taking this drug? Why would Charles have taken the green ring? Again, I can't think of a reason. Was Charles the person going to Tim Kono's apartment and screaming? No, he wasn't. Charles does have that line that makes you think you can lose a lot with one big mistake. Also in this episode, Charles keeps trying to shut down the podcast as if he doesn't want a killer revealed. This is flimsy stuff, but it's all I can think of. The final suspect, Mabel. And if you've listened to all these podcasts, you know that there is a lot of fingers you could point at Mabel. Let's go through this again. In this case, I want to use a line Jan has. Listen to this line Jan said on her date with Charles. Jan says to Charles, "My therapist says we are all driven to recreate the dynamic of our first wound so we can change the ending." Isn't that what Mabel's doing? Recreating the dynamic of her first wound? The breaking up of the Hardy Boys? And isn't she the one changing the ending? Mabel has changed the ending. She ended up with Oscar, while Zoe and Tim are gone. Mabel, who tells Oscar she's been waiting for him, changing the ending of the dynamic of her first wound. Was killing Tim Kono the way to make it right for Mabel? She does fit a lot of options you would have for the killer, including this week, who's somebody who would go to Tim Kono's apartment late at night and fool around and maybe scream? Well, a woman scream. There aren't too many female suspects. Mabel fits that. Mabel would have kept the green ring if she had found it, as a way, once again, to fix that earlier wrong. I've already mentioned on previous podcasts that Mabel's mom said she had night tremors. That's the type of problem I believe might be resolved with the poison that killed Tim Kono. Mabel, who possibly could know sign language and was there in the room when Zoe was using sign language to tell Theo, "I meant what I said when I thought you were hot." Mabel would see Zoe flirting with somebody else instead of Oscar. Mabel showed up late in episode 1 to the restaurant after Charles and Oliver were already there. Now, in that table setting, you can tell Oliver's drinking wine. I couldn't see what Charles is drinking. Mabel is drinking a dark liquid. It could be Diet Coke, but hey, it could be bourbon. Now, could Mabel drink bourbon with Tim? Yeah, he probably would have called her there once he finally got his hand on the green ring, don't you think? Mabel with the mysterious aunt whose apartment she's redecorating in a way that doesn't make any sense. Mabel, who saw the Arconia as her light, as the place she escaped to when she was a kid, who seems to worship all the people and paint them on the walls of the place she's staying. Mabel, in the Arconia, a place her own mother says is bad for her. Okay, let's keep going on Mabel. Why stab Jan? Well, she didn't like Jan. Maybe not as much outwardly as Oliver didn't like her, but she didn't like Jan, and Jan was turning the focus away from the Demuses. I know nobody likes it. I know nobody wants to think about season 2, but let's think about the first scene in the series. Mabel is hovering over a body that she says it's not what it looks like. But Abel also in that very first episode dreams of stabbing and killing somebody. Who is the person she stabs and kills? Oscar for ruining her chance to recreate the dynamic of the first wound and change the ending? Does she stab Jan in a tie-dye hoodie for getting in the way of her perfect Arconia image? Mabel, who found the garbage in suicide notes in the first episode without really looking too hard. Mabel, who easily could have planted that ring in Bunny's apartment in episode 1. A ring and package which Bunny has never mentioned missing, even though it was theoretically in her foyer. Mabel, who somehow during the fire alarm didn't see tie-dye guy hoodie on the stairs. Well, we know he was on the stairs. Where was she? I don't know. I don't have all the pieces. But I think we've solved it. I think we know who killed Tim Kono. Am I right or am I wrong? Either way, guys. Now, hey, next week, you may not be interested in a podcast called Let's Solve Only Murders in the Building if the mystery's already solved. But either way, come back next week. I'll eat my crow if I'm wrong, and I'll hand out some honors to everybody who got it right in our feedback. Whether it's on Twitter @PPHQ, Instagram @PPHQ, Facebook.com/PPHQ, or on our YouTube page, youtube.com/C/PPmedia. Guys, I think we've done it. Thank you so much for your feedback. Let's go.